There was a particular kind of cold in 1970s Britain, the sort that greeted you before you'd even opened your eyes. You remember it, don't you? That quiet moment in the morning when you'd breathe out and actually see the cloud of mist drift above your pillow, as if you were camping on some frosty mountainside rather than sleeping in your own bedroom. Ice traced delicate patterns across the inside of the window, turning the glass into a frozen mosaic that looked strangely beautiful and absolutely brutal. And then came the real test, placing one foot onto that lino floor, so cold it made you gasp and pull your toes back in retreat. It's almost funny now, the way we braced ourselves for the morning chill. But back then, it was simply life, the opening chapter of winters that shaped the days to come. The truth is, those cold mornings weren't just bad luck. They were the reality of a Britain still feeling the weight of post-war austerity. Homes were poorly insulated, with single-glazed windows that let in drafts and trapped nothing but the chill. Central heating was far from a standard feature. In fact, most families only heated one room, usually the living room, where the whole family would gather, huddled around a fire or an electric heater. Bedrooms, however, were a different story. Your bedroom wasn't supposed to be warm, that was considered a luxury. Waking up to frost on the inside of your windows wasn't unusual. It was just part of life. And then came the 1973 energy crisis, which only made things worse. With coal shortages and skyrocketing fuel prices, heating became a real luxury few could afford. People adapted, of course. Hot water bottles, layers of clothes, and boiled kettles for warmth were all part of the survival kit. Young people today don't realize just how much we took cold for granted back then. For those of us who lived through it, it wasn't a hardship, it was normal. In the 1970s, the living room was more than just a place to relax. It was the only warm place in the house. If you were lucky enough to have a fire, it was usually a coal-burning one, crackling away in the hearth, filling the room with that unmistakable scent of smoke and burning wood. The small gas heaters, if you had one, did little more than take the edge off. The real heat came from the ritual of stoking the fire. Each evening, the men in the house, or anyone brave enough, would gather around the hearth, rolling up old newspapers to make makeshift fire starters, and carefully piling in coal, hoping for that perfect burst of warmth. Of course, there was always the battle for warmth. The race to Bagsy, the best spot by the fire, the one closest to the glowing embers. Everyone else would pile on layers of clothes, blankets, or anything they could find to ward off the chill. Fingers would thaw painfully as the warmth seeped back into them, a kind of relief that felt both physical and emotional. Those cold nights were where family bonds were formed. The fire wasn't just for heat, it was a gathering point, a place where stories were told, jokes shared, and warmth, both literal and emotional, was passed around like a gift. There were all sorts of strange winter rituals we relied on, little tricks that would make today's generation stare in disbelief. Hot water bottles were absolute lifesavers, tucked into beds long before anyone climbed in, warming a small circle of mattress that felt like heaven in an otherwise icy room. Jumpers over pajamas were perfectly normal, and dressing gowns were so thick they could practically stand up on their own. And then there were the electric blankets, those slightly suspicious ones that made faint crackling noises whenever you shifted your weight. Families planned bath nights carefully, not for convenience, but to stop the pipes from freezing solid. If frost crept across the inside of the windows, someone would boil a kettle and pour the steam against the glass, watching the patterns melt like magic. Looking back, these habits seem almost comical, yet they were part of the quiet creativity of winter living. We didn't complain much. We simply adapted, finding warmth wherever we could. Those odd rituals stitched themselves into our routines, reminders of a Britain where cold demanded ingenuity rather than comfort. And strange as it sounds now, there was something bonding about it all, a shared understanding that everyone was fighting the same winter battle. Those moments, as they were, helped shape the stories we still tell today. School mornings in the 1970s carried a cold all of their own, the kind that settled into the walls and stayed there long after the bell rang. Classrooms were icy chambers, with radiators that gave off little more than a gentle sigh of warmth, if they worked at all. You remember the sight of 30 children sitting at their desks, puffing out clouds of breath as if the entire class were warming up for a choir performance. Teachers, wrapped in their own cardigans, would clap their hands and insist, "It'll warm up once you start writing," even though everyone knew it rarely did. And then there was the playground, a frozen expanse where scraped knees, chilblains, and stinging fingers were simply part of growing up. The smell of wet wool from soaked gloves and scarves followed you back indoors, clinging to every child in the room. Yet we carried on, running around until the cold burned our cheeks and our feet felt like blocks of ice. Those winters toughened us in small but lasting ways. We didn't think of it as hardship. It was just school, and perhaps, without realizing it, those cold days chipped away at us gently, shaping a quiet resilience we still carry today. Looking back, the cold did more than make our mornings difficult. It shaped the rhythm of our lives. In a strange way, it pulled families closer. When the only warm room in the house was the living room, everyone gathered there by default, sharing blankets, stories, and the soft crackle of a fire. There was a simplicity to it all, a sense that comfort wasn't something you bought, but something you created together. A hot drink tasted richer, a warm bath felt like a celebration, and slipping into a bed that held even a hint of heat felt like a small victory. That era taught us to appreciate the little things, not the grand gestures, but the quiet comforts that made winter bearable. And, just as importantly, the cold reminded us we weren't alone. Neighbors checked on each other, families rallied, and children learned that resilience wasn't about enduring in silence, but about enduring together. Those winters left their mark not just on our memories, but on the very character of the generation that lived through them, sturdy, grateful, and quietly united by shared experience. Today, most of us wake up in warm bedrooms without giving it a second thought. Double glazing, central heating, thick insulation, they've transformed winter into little more than a mild inconvenience. It's a comfort we're grateful for, yet it quietly marks the distance between then and now. In trading cold floors for thermostats, we've also traded some of the closeness that came from gathering in a single warm room. The patience learned from waiting for a fire to catch, and the resourcefulness that shaped our everyday routines. But perhaps that's why those memories feel so precious. We didn't just survive those winters. They shaped who we became.